Keanu Reeves saves LeBron James from drowning. The sun hung low over the tranquil lake, casting golden hues on the still water. A perfect day, quiet, peaceful, an oasis away from the world's chaos. The air was thick with the sweet scent of pine trees, and the distant chirping of birds was the only sound that broke the silence. Keanu Reeves and LeBron James, two men of different worlds, were enjoying a rare moment of calm together at a lakeside retreat. Keanu, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and cargo shorts, sat on the shore, his gaze fixed on the water. He had always found solace in nature, in the simplicity of the outdoors. It was where he could think, reflect, and breathe without the weight of the world on his shoulders. LeBron, on the other hand, was full of energy, his laughter echoing across the water as he launched himself into the lake once again. He was an athlete, strong, fast, and confident, and he loved pushing his limits. Today, the water was just another challenge to conquer. His massive frame made the water seem almost insignificant, and he swam with the ease of someone who had spent most of his life in the spotlight, always in control, always leading. Keanu watched with a slight smile, shaking his head. "You know, you should probably slow down a bit," he called out, his voice calm but with an edge of caution. LeBron, his face already half submerged in the cool water, looked up with a playful grin. "You worry too much, man. It's just a little swim." Keanu shrugged, taking a long drink from his water bottle. "It's not the swim I'm worried about. It's the lake." LeBron laughed again and dove deeper into the water, splashing Keanu with a wave before swimming further out into the lake. He could feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins as he kicked through the water with ease, the world seeming smaller and smaller with each stroke. Keanu continued to watch, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly as LeBron swam farther from the shore. He had no reason to worry. LeBron was an Olympic-level athlete, after all. Still, something about the way the lake seemed to whisper against the shore made him uneasy. "You're pushing it, LeBron," Keanu muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. But he didn't say anything more. He trusted LeBron, and he knew the man could handle himself. Then, without warning, the water shifted. LeBron's body jerked slightly as his strokes became less controlled. The once calm water began to churn under him, a current he hadn't noticed pulling at his legs. He kicked harder, trying to regain his rhythm, but the water didn't cooperate. It was stronger than he expected. A knot of panic tightened in his chest. "Keanu!" LeBron's voice rang out, more urgent this time. He kicked harder, but the water continued to pull at him, dragging him further into the center of the lake. Keanu's expression changed in an instant, his earlier calm replaced by a focus that could cut through steel. Without thinking, he tossed his water bottle aside and jumped to his feet, sprinting toward the water's edge. He was already moving before LeBron's voice fully registered, his body instinctively reacting to the distress in LeBron's call. LeBron's head bobbed above the water for a brief second, but his strength was waning. The current was relentless, pulling at him like an invisible force. His breath came in short gasps as his powerful muscles fought against the pull. The shore seemed farther away with each desperate stroke. "Keanu!" LeBron's voice cracked this time, laced with panic. Keanu reached the water's edge, diving in without hesitation. The cold shock of the lake water hit him as he swam toward LeBron, his strokes long and powerful. He was a swimmer himself, though not in the way LeBron was. But he didn't need to be the world's strongest swimmer. He only needed to get there before it was too late. The water was choppy, the current far stronger than either of them had anticipated. LeBron's head bobbed under the water, his arms flailing to keep his face above the surface. He was fighting, but the strength he had was fading, overtaken by fear. Keanu reached him just as LeBron's head went under again, his body suddenly going limp in the water. "LeBron!" Keanu shouted as he grabbed hold of him. The weight of LeBron's body was a dead weight in his arms. Keanu pulled him up, keeping his own head above water as he struggled to keep them both afloat. LeBron's eyes fluttered, disoriented, his breathing erratic. He coughed, sputtering water, but couldn't seem to find his bearings. "Stay with me," Keanu said, his voice firm but calm. He knew he couldn't panic. Not now. He had to get them both to safety. But the current was unforgiving. It was pulling at them both, trying to tear them apart. Keanu gritted his teeth, using all his strength to drag LeBron toward the shore, kicking furiously in the water. The shoreline, once close, now seemed like miles away. LeBron's limbs were heavy, and his mind was clouded by the panic and the water filling his lungs. His head swam, his thoughts foggy, and he could barely keep his eyes open. The realization hit him then. He was in real trouble. Keanu could feel LeBron's weight dragging him down, but he didn't let go. He pushed harder, his arms aching with every stroke. His instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had kept him alive in countless other dangerous situations. He wasn't about to let LeBron drown. Not now. Not here. The shore was still a few dozen feet away, but Keanu's resolve was unshakable. He dug deep, his heart pounding in his chest. LeBron, though strong, was starting to slip, his struggles weaker with each passing second. His head went under the water again, but this time, Keanu wasn't about to let go. With one final, desperate effort, Keanu pulled LeBron toward him, grabbing a fistful of LeBron's life vest and yanking him back to the surface. Keanu's chest burned as he fought against the water, every muscle in his body screaming in protest, but he didn't stop. "LeBron, I need you to hold on," Keanu said, the words barely audible above the crashing water. His grip tightened on the life vest, steadying the struggling athlete. LeBron's gasping breath was all Keanu needed to hear to know he wasn't alone in this fight. His body was heavy, and his strength was fading, but Keanu's firm grip around him gave him a sense of security, something he desperately needed in this moment of helplessness. Keanu's eyes locked onto the distant shore, his focus laser-sharp as he continued to drag them both toward safety. The water raged around them, but Keanu's focus was unwavering. Every stroke was a battle, every second stretching into eternity, but the shore was getting closer. LeBron, still gasping for air, managed a weak but grateful smile, the fear in his eyes beginning to subside as Keanu's calm presence reassured him. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time since the current had pulled him under, LeBron felt hope rising inside him. Keanu's voice came again, steady and reassuring. "We're almost there, LeBron. Just a little longer." And then with one final push, they reached the shore. Keanu stumbled onto the rocky edge, pulling LeBron onto solid ground. Both men collapsed onto the sand, gasping for air, their chests heaving with the weight of their shared struggle. Keanu didn't speak at first. His breathing was labored, but his hands were still steady as he checked LeBron's pulse. It was strong, reassuring. LeBron turned his head toward Keanu, still gasping, but his face now filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice hoarse. Keanu simply nodded, his eyes softening. "You're safe now." The lake, once calm and serene, now seemed almost alien to LeBron. The waves lapped against the shore, gentle in comparison to the powerful current that had nearly claimed him. He lay on the sand, his lungs still working to expel the water he'd swallowed, his body still trembling from the shock of the near drowning. His eyes were closed as he tried to catch his breath, his hands gripping the ground as if the earth itself could anchor him to safety. Keanu sat beside him, his expression unreadable but calm, as always. The moments of pure adrenaline that had fueled the rescue were now fading, leaving behind a quiet intensity. Keanu, though visibly exhausted, never wavered. His gaze shifted toward LeBron, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. "You good?" Keanu asked quietly, his voice cutting through the thick silence. LeBron managed to nod weakly, his lips curling into a small, tired smile. His voice was raspy when he spoke, barely a whisper. "I don't even know how to thank you, man. I thought I wasn't gonna make it." Keanu's eyes softened for just a moment, but his expression quickly returned to its usual calm. He patted LeBron's shoulder, offering a brief, reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to thank me. You're here. That's all that matters." LeBron let out a shaky breath, his muscles still tense from the fight for survival. His mind was racing, replaying the moments when he'd realized he was losing control of the situation. The overwhelming sense of fear that had gripped him had been unlike anything he had ever felt, even in the most intense basketball games. But this was real. This was life and death. "I didn't think it would happen like that," LeBron said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been swimming my whole life, and never once did I think I'd get in over my head." Keanu glanced over at him, his gaze contemplative. "You never know what the water will throw at you. That's why you gotta respect it. Even the strongest swimmers get caught by currents." LeBron turned his head toward him, the words sinking in. There was truth in what Keanu said, truth that went beyond the water. It was about life itself. Sometimes, no matter how strong or prepared you think you are, things can turn on you in an instant. And sometimes, it's not about strength but about trusting the right people when everything falls apart. "I'm grateful, man," LeBron said, his voice steadying a bit. "You saved my life today. I don't know if I'd be here if you hadn't." "Hey," Keanu cut him off, raising a hand. "You'd be here. You just needed someone to help you back up. That's all." There was a brief silence between them, broken only by the sound of the water gently rolling onto the shore. Keanu's words echoed in LeBron's mind, a reminder of something bigger than any game, any challenge. Something human, something real. He thought about the countless times he'd been in control, a leader on the court, never showing weakness. But now, lying here in the sand, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel, vulnerability. And in that moment, it wasn't just the vulnerability of the near drowning, it was the realization of his own fragility. Keanu stood up, his legs stiff from the swim. He didn't offer any more words, just a quiet understanding that the moment was still raw for both of them. He took a few steps back, running his hand through his wet hair as he surveyed the horizon. LeBron, still catching his breath, watched him for a moment before speaking again. "Why didn't you panic?" LeBron asked, a question that had been on his mind since the moment Keanu had dived in after him. "I mean, you were calm the whole time. You never seemed worried." Keanu looked at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I've been through worse. You learn to stay calm when the stakes are high." LeBron let the words sink in, his mind racing. That's the kind of calm I need to learn. I've been through a lot, but nothing like that. You were in control the whole time." Keanu's smile faded, and he shook his head slowly. "Control is an illusion, man. The more you try to hold on to it, the more it slips away. You can't control the water, but you can control how you respond to it." LeBron watched Keanu closely, impressed not just by the words, but by the weight they carried. Keanu's calm wasn't just a trait, it was a way of life, a philosophy that had allowed him to navigate not only dangerous situations but the complexities of the world itself. It was a quiet strength that LeBron realized he needed to tap into more often. He had been so used to being in control, to having every situation in his life lined up and managed. But what happened when things went wrong? What happened when you had no control left? Keanu reached down and grabbed LeBron's arm, pulling him gently to his feet. LeBron wobbled for a second, his body still weak from the ordeal, but Keanu's steady hand kept him grounded. "You okay?" Keanu asked, looking him in the eye. "Yeah," LeBron replied, his voice more solid than it had been moments ago. "I think I'll be okay." Keanu gave a small nod. "But take it easy. Don't push yourself too hard." LeBron looked at him, his chest still rising and falling as he caught his breath, but a grin slowly spread across his face. "You know," he said, his tone lighter, "I think I owe you a lot more than just a thank you." Keanu raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging at his lips. "Like what?" LeBron chuckled softly. "Well, for starters, how about you let me teach you how to dunk sometime? I promise, I won't pull you out of the water for that." Keanu laughed, the sound genuine and deep. "I'll take you up on that. But only if we're talking about a friendly game, not a dunk contest." The two shared a brief moment of laughter, the tension of the situation slowly fading as they stood together by the water. Despite the heaviness that had preceded this moment, there was an undeniable bond between them now, one that had been forged in the most unlikely of circumstances. LeBron, the athlete, had been brought to his knees by the water, and Keanu, the quiet hero, had pulled him from the depths. They were connected in a way that transcended sports or fame or their lives outside of this moment. It was simply about survival, trust, and understanding. LeBron clapped Keanu on the back, his smile now genuine and full of respect. "I don't know what I'd do without you, man. Thanks again. Keanu smiled in return, his face softening with quiet satisfaction. You're welcome, LeBron. Just remember, when the water gets rough, it's not about how strong you are. It's about how well you listen. As the sun dipped lower behind them, the two men walked back toward the cabin, their footsteps echoing in the quiet. The ordeal was over, but the lessons of the day would stay with them for much longer. They had learned something profound, not just about survival, but about vulnerability, strength, and the power of trusting those around you. The lake, once an enemy, was now just another challenge to be faced, and together, they had faced it. And whatever came next, they knew they would face it as partners, each in their own way, but united by the bond they had forged in the water. As they made their way back to the cabin, the world around them felt different, calmer, more purposeful. The tension from the lake had melted away, leaving behind an unspoken understanding between them. The vastness of the water, which had seemed threatening just hours before, now felt distant and safe, a part of their past. LeBron's steps were a little slower now, but with each step, his body began to feel less like lead and more like his own again. The lingering weariness from the near drowning was still there, but it was being replaced by something else. A new sense of gratitude, a new perspective. Man, LeBron said, his voice breaking the silence between them, I don't even know where to start. I've been in some tough situations, but that's a different kind of fight. Keanu nodded, the cool evening breeze ruffling his damp hair. It's a different kind of challenge. The water doesn't care who you are or what you've done. It just is. You have to respect that. LeBron chuckled, though it was a soft, contemplative sound. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna start respecting it more from now on. His eyes shifted toward Keanu, gratitude still present in his gaze. You didn't have to jump in. But you did. And you saved me. I won't forget that. Keanu didn't seem to be seeking gratitude, but there was a warmth in his eyes that told LeBron his words were appreciated. You would have done the same for me. It's just what you do when someone's in need. You don't think about it. They reached the cabin, and Keanu opened the door. Inside, the atmosphere was relaxed, almost cozy. The fire in the fireplace crackled gently, casting flickering shadows across the walls. They both stopped for a moment in the doorway, taking in the warmth of the space after the chill of the lake. After everything today, LeBron said, a playful glint appearing in his eyes, how about we just relax for a bit? No talk of currents or life jackets. Just a little peace. Keanu gave a small smile, the tension from earlier melting away. Sounds good to me. They sat in the living room, sipping hot tea and looking out at the lake through the large windows. The water now seemed calm, its surface glimmering with the light of the setting sun. A far cry from the dangerous currents they had faced earlier. I still can't believe it, LeBron said, leaning back in his chair and staring at the fire. I've been through injuries, championship games, even a few moments where I thought I might lose it all, but nothing compares to that feeling of helplessness in the water. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, everything I knew didn't matter. It was just me and the current. And that's when you jumped in. Keanu's eyes softened, the flickering light from the fire reflecting off his face. He didn't speak immediately, but his expression held something deeper, an understanding that LeBron was still processing the weight of what had happened. Sometimes, you need someone else to remind you that you're not alone. That's all. LeBron looked at Keanu, his mind running through the last few hours. The struggle, the fear, the relief, and now this quiet, almost surreal peace. I don't know if I could have made it without you, LeBron said quietly, his tone reflective. That moment when I realized I wasn't going to make it? I've never felt so vulnerable. Keanu nodded, his gaze distant as if he, too, was recalling the events. You wouldn't have drowned, LeBron. Not as long as I was there. The thing about being a survivor is knowing that even when things seem impossible, there's always something you can do. You might not see it in the moment, but there's always a way. LeBron smiled, his posture relaxing further. You make it sound easy. Keanu shrugged, his calm demeanor as steady as ever. It's not easy, but it's simple. You focus on the next step. You don't get overwhelmed by the whole thing. LeBron leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on Keanu. I think that's something I really need to learn. I'm always so focused on the next big thing. The next game, the next challenge. But what about the moment? What about the now? Keanu turned his head toward the window, his expression thoughtful. The now is all we have. If you don't focus on the present, you miss everything that matters. LeBron sat back, absorbing Keanu's words. It was a simple idea, but it resonated deeply. For years, he had been driven by the future, by the next big win, the next game. But he had never stopped to think about how fleeting each moment was. How every breath, every step, was a victory in itself. Guess that's a life lesson, LeBron said, the weight of it settling into him. Not just about basketball, but about life. Keanu looked at him with a soft smile. Exactly. Life doesn't wait. It keeps moving whether you're ready or not. There was a long pause, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable but felt full of meaning. LeBron wasn't used to this, sitting still, reflecting in silence. But it felt good, like something had clicked inside him. Later that night, they found themselves back outside, sitting on the cabin's porch and watching the stars emerge in the clear sky above. The air was cool but not cold, and the sounds of the night were peaceful, a far cry from the chaos of earlier. Did you ever think you'd be out here doing this? LeBron asked, breaking the quiet. Keanu chuckled softly, shaking his head. I've had some interesting experiences, but no, this wasn't on the list. But sometimes, the unexpected things are the most important. LeBron nodded, looking up at the stars. You're right. Maybe I need to let go of the pressure I put on myself. Just live for now. It's easier said than done, Keanu replied, his gaze fixed on the sky. But you've got the right idea. Trust the process, trust yourself. You're doing more than you think, even on the days it feels like you're not. LeBron's eyes softened, and he smiled. Thanks, Keanu. Seriously. Today, you taught me more than I've learned in a while. Keanu turned to him with a faint smile. We teach each other, LeBron. That's how it works. There was another brief silence, but this time, it was filled with understanding. Keanu had given LeBron more than just a lesson in surviving a near-death experience. He had shared a philosophy, a way of life that LeBron could take with him, not just on the basketball court, but in everything. It was a reminder that no matter how much success or fame someone achieved, the value of the present moment and the quiet strength of vulnerability were the things that truly mattered. As the stars twinkled above them, LeBron knew that he wasn't the same man who had stepped into the lake that afternoon. He was something more, something stronger, not because of his athleticism, but because of his ability to reflect, to embrace the moments, and to trust others when it mattered most. The hours passed in a comfortable silence, the kind only true understanding can create. Keanu and LeBron sat together on the porch, watching as the night enveloped them, the last vestiges of daylight fading into the velvet black sky. The stars above them glimmered like diamonds scattered across a canvas, endless and eternal. For a moment, they both felt as if time had slowed, an unfamiliar sensation in their fast-paced lives. LeBron shifted slightly in his chair, his thoughts drifting between the events of the day and the conversations they'd shared. The uncertainty he had felt, the helplessness in the water, was still fresh in his mind, but it no longer consumed him. There was something soothing about the stillness of the lake and the quiet company of someone who had seen his share of struggles. You know, LeBron started, breaking the silence, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about not being in control of everything. You've got a point. I've been so caught up in trying to control every moment, every play, every game, that I forgot to just live in the moment. Keanu turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting LeBron's. There was a softness to his gaze, a recognition of the personal growth happening in front of him. Control's a tough thing, Keanu said. The more you chase it, the more it slips away. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just let go. LeBron nodded slowly, feeling the weight of Keanu's words settle into him. He had spent so much of his life pushing to be the best, always in the spotlight, always trying to be perfect. But today, in the water, he had been reminded that he was human. He was fallible. And that, in itself, wasn't a weakness. It was a part of being alive. I think I've been so focused on winning, I forgot what it means to just be, LeBron continued, his voice thoughtful. To be with people. To be in the moment. Maybe that's what I've been missing all along. Keanu gave a slight nod of agreement, the flicker of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He understood. It wasn't about winning championships or becoming a legend. It was about understanding that life was fleeting and the moments in between mattered just as much. Perhaps more. For the first time in a long while, LeBron felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. The pressure to be everything to everyone, to always perform at the highest level, was exhausting. But here, in this moment, he didn't have to be the basketball icon, the superstar. He didn't have to be anything other than what he was. Just a man, a human being, having a conversation with another person who understood. LeBron let out a deep breath, his chest feeling lighter. "You know, I'm really grateful for this," he said, his tone sincere. "For you being here. You've given me a lot to think about, Keanu. I've spent my whole life building this image of what I'm supposed to be. But I don't think I've ever really understood what it means to just exist, you know? To just be me." Keanu looked out over the water, his gaze distant. The ripples of the lake, disturbed by the gentle breeze, seemed to mirror the thoughts swirling in his mind. He had never been one for grand speeches or sentimental gestures. But he understood the power of a moment like this, the quiet connection between two people who had both faced their own battles, who had found peace in each other's company. "Sometimes," Keanu said softly, "you have to stop trying to be what everyone expects you to be. You're not here to live up to an image. You're here to live your life. Whatever that looks like, whatever that means. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Not even to yourself." LeBron turned his gaze to Keanu, taking in the calm, almost mystical aura that surrounded him. There was something reassuring about Keanu's presence, something that radiated an understanding beyond words. In that moment, LeBron realized that the lessons he had been learning on the court about leadership and strength were just a fraction of the wisdom he could gain from someone who had mastered the art of being present, being real. Keanu stood slowly, stretching his arms above his head, and then looking out at the night sky once more. "I'm glad you're here, LeBron. You're stronger than you think. You've got a lot more in you than just what's on the court." LeBron smiled softly, his eyes bright with gratitude. "Thanks, man. For everything." The next morning, the air was cooler, the sunlight soft against the horizon. LeBron woke up feeling different, refreshed, as though something inside him had shifted overnight. He stepped out onto the porch, taking in the quiet morning, the gentle rustling of leaves in the trees, and the stillness of the water. Keanu was already up, his figure silhouetted against the rising sun as he looked out over the lake, the calmness of the scene in front of him reflecting the tranquility within him. LeBron approached quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. He stood next to Keanu, his eyes following the path of the water, the faint ripples catching the early light. "Beautiful morning," LeBron remarked, breaking the silence. Keanu glanced over at him, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his face. "Yeah, it's a good day." LeBron nodded, then looked out at the lake again, feeling the peace of the moment settle into his bones. He hadn't felt like this in a long time, truly at peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from winning or from success. It was the kind of peace that came from understanding oneself, from accepting that not every moment needed to be controlled, not every victory needed to be chased. "Keanu," LeBron said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity, "I think I'm starting to get it. Life's not about what I can control. It's about being present in the moment, being who I really am, not who I think people want me to be." Keanu didn't answer immediately, but he didn't need to. The words were enough. They carried weight, but not the kind of weight that felt like a burden. It was the weight of understanding, of finding the balance between what you could control and what you had to let go of. "You'll get there," Keanu said finally, his voice quiet but reassuring. "It takes time. But you're on the right path." LeBron smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks. I think I'm starting to see that too." They stood there for a while, side by side, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, feeling the gentle breeze against their skin. It wasn't just about the rescue anymore, or even the lessons they'd shared. It was about the silent bond between them, a bond that had been forged in the heat of a moment where life and death had been a breath apart. And now, in this quiet, reflective morning, it felt like the beginning of something more, something deeper than just a friendship born of circumstance. Keanu turned to LeBron, his face unreadable as ever, but there was warmth in his eyes. Ready to head back? LeBron looked at him, the peaceful sense of clarity still settling in his chest. Yeah, but you know what? I think I'll take my time getting back. For once, I think I'm okay with just being in the moment. Keanu's smile was small but genuine. I like that. And as they walked back toward the cabin, the sound of their footsteps in the soft earth behind them, both men knew they had shared something powerful. Not just in surviving the lake, but in learning what it meant to truly live. The drive back to the city was quiet, the morning sun now casting long shadows across the highway. Keanu and LeBron sat in the car together, each lost in their thoughts, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. It was a surreal transition, moving from the peaceful stillness of the lake back into the hustle of the world. But something inside LeBron had shifted during their time at the retreat, something that had made the noise of the world seem a little less important. Keanu glanced over at LeBron, who sat beside him with his eyes focused out the window. There was a quiet confidence to him now, a sense of inner peace that hadn't been there before. Keanu had seen it in people before, he'd seen it in himself when he had learned to let go, to stop fighting the things he couldn't control. And now, for the first time in a long time, LeBron seemed to understand that too. "How are you feeling?" Keanu asked, his voice casual but carrying an undercurrent of curiosity. LeBron turned to him, his expression thoughtful. "Different. Lighter. I don't know if that makes sense. But I feel like I've been carrying something heavy for a long time and I didn't even realize it until now." Keanu nodded, his eyes still on the road. "That's the thing with life. We carry all this weight without even knowing it. And then, something comes along that makes us put it down for a minute. You can either pick it back up or leave it where it is." LeBron looked at him, a smile tugging at his lips. "I think I'm gonna leave it there. At least for a little while." Keanu smiled, not with the outward expression of someone who was pleased with the answer, but with a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing someone else had found their way. "Good. That's the right choice." The drive continued in companionable silence, both men allowing the change they'd undergone together to settle into the quiet of the ride. LeBron's mind kept drifting back to the lake, to the moment when the world had felt like it was slipping away from him. He remembered the fear, the helplessness, the way his body had felt like it was being torn apart by the current. But he also remembered Keanu's calmness, his quiet strength, the way he had steadied him when the waters had seemed to overwhelm him. LeBron thought about how much he had taken for granted, the constant push for more, the next win, the next challenge, the next moment of victory. He had always been so focused on being the best, on conquering everything in his path, that he hadn't taken the time to truly appreciate the moments in between. The stillness, the quiet connection with people who understood him. The world felt different now. They arrived at Keanu's place in the city later that afternoon, the transition back to reality becoming sharper with each passing mile. Keanu didn't say much as they walked inside, but there was something unspoken between them. It was the bond that had been forged in the uncertainty of the lake, and it would continue to carry weight in their lives, even if they never spoke of it again. Keanu went straight to the kitchen to make himself a cup of coffee, moving as effortlessly as always. He wasn't the type to dwell on emotions or words. His actions always spoke louder than anything he could say. LeBron stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching him for a moment before speaking. "You know," LeBron began, his tone more serious now, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About trusting people. I've been so caught up in trying to be the guy who does it all that I never really thought about the people who are there when it counts. Not just in the big moments, but in the quiet ones." Keanu glanced up from the counter, his brow raised slightly as if he hadn't quite expected the turn in conversation. "We all need someone to rely on. No one can do it alone, not for long. Even the strongest people have their moments." LeBron smiled softly. "Yeah, I get that now. And I appreciate you being there when I needed it. I don't know how you stayed so calm, but I'm glad you did." Keanu didn't respond immediately, but the look he gave LeBron was one of quiet acknowledgement. There was no need for thanks or elaboration. Keanu's actions had spoken for him, and LeBron understood that. They spent the rest of the day in relative quiet, LeBron sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, while Keanu read a book. There was no need for further conversation. The peace they had found during their time together at the lake was still present, unspoken, but strong. As the sun dipped behind the buildings outside, LeBron found himself thinking about the next steps in his life, about how he could carry this newfound clarity forward. It was more than just a lesson in vulnerability or strength. It was about balance. About learning to exist in the moments between the battles, between the challenges, and not just survive them, but embrace them. The next morning, LeBron stood outside Keanu's apartment, his bag slung over his shoulder. The sky was clear, and the air was cool, perfect for the fresh start he was about to make. He had a flight to catch, back to his life, to the basketball court, to everything he had left behind for a brief moment of reflection. But this time, he wasn't heading back the same person who had arrived at the cabin. He wasn't the same man who had plunged into the water, thinking he had it all under control. Keanu appeared in the doorway, his usual quiet presence offering no fanfare. But there was a subtle shift in the air, a sense that the journey they had shared had left a lasting mark. LeBron turned to him, his expression soft. "Thanks again. For everything." Keanu simply nodded, a faint smile curling at the corners of his mouth. "Take it easy, LeBron. Keep it in the moment. You'll be fine." LeBron smiled, feeling the weight of Keanu's words settle into him once more. "I will. I promise." Keanu stepped back, allowing LeBron to leave. As the door clicked shut behind him, LeBron took a deep breath, the kind of deep breath that only comes after a long, hard lesson. He was ready for whatever came next, not because he was prepared, but because he had learned to trust. He had learned to let go. Weeks passed, and life for both men returned to its usual rhythm. LeBron was back on the court, but now, in the quiet moments between games, he found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He wasn't just a champion, he was a man, and that was something he hadn't always allowed himself to be. He'd never forget the lake, the fear, or the calm hand that had pulled him from the depths. And he wouldn't forget the man who had reminded him that it was okay to not always be in control. Keanu, for his part, continued his life with his usual quiet intensity. He didn't need the recognition or applause, but he knew that in moments like these, where lives had intersected, he had made a difference. That was enough. And as the days went on, both men carried the lessons they had learned with them, lessons of trust, of letting go, and of finding peace not just in the triumphs, but in the stillness between them. The weeks following the retreat passed in a blur of training, games, and media commitments for LeBron. Yet, despite the packed schedule, he couldn't shake the memory of that moment by the lake, the stillness that had followed the chaos. Each time he laced up his shoes before a game, or sat in the locker room preparing to face another opponent, the thoughts from that time spent with Keanu crept into his mind. LeBron had always prided himself on being a leader, an unwavering figure on the court, the man who inspired his teammates to push harder, play smarter. But now, when he entered the arena, there was something deeper in his chest. A sense of peace. He didn't just want to be the best basketball player anymore. He wanted to be someone who understood balance, someone who could take the pressure, but who also knew when to let go. It wasn't easy. The pressure of being a global icon, the demands on his time, the expectation of perfection, it still loomed large. But now, every time he felt overwhelmed, he reminded himself of the lake. He thought of Keanu's calm words, his unwavering steadiness in the face of fear. The more you try to control it, the more it slips away. It became his mantra. During grueling practices, when the weight of the season began to build, he would close his eyes and focus on his breath, imagining himself back in that moment on the shore, when he had finally realized that control was never his to begin with. The lake had taught him that. Keanu, for his part, had returned to his usual routine as well. But he wasn't untouched by the experience either. Though he never spoke about it, the retreat had sparked something in him too. When LeBron had left, Keanu found himself reflecting on the rare connection they had shared, two men from vastly different worlds, yet united in their shared struggle, in the rawness of the experience. It reminded him of his own journey, one of finding peace in a world that often felt out of control. Keanu's quiet, introspective nature had always kept him grounded, but that weekend had opened up new facets of himself, ones that he had forgotten. He realized that the lessons he had passed on to LeBron were not just for him, but for everyone. Everyone needed to find balance. Keanu had never been one for speaking about his feelings or emotions in great depth, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized how important it was to open up, to share the strength he had learned through his own struggles. He had always been an observer, watching life unfold, but that time spent helping LeBron had made him realize how much power there was in offering someone else a hand when they needed it. It wasn't long before LeBron found himself facing another major challenge. A back injury that had nagged at him throughout the season had finally caught up, sidelining him for several games. For someone like LeBron, used to being on the court day in and day out, this was a shock. It wasn't just the physical pain, though that was significant, but the mental toll. For the first time in years, he found himself forced to stop, to take a step back from the game that had defined him. The first few days of recovery were grueling. LeBron struggled to keep his mind from racing, from thinking about the next game, the next title, the next season. He was constantly pushing himself, but now he was forced to be still. It was a lesson he wasn't sure he was ready to learn. But then, in the quiet of his hotel room, as the city buzzed around him, LeBron found himself thinking back to that time at the lake. He closed his eyes and imagined the water, the calmness, the stillness. He had been so focused on reaching the shore that he hadn't taken the time to appreciate the view from the middle of the lake, the vastness that surrounded him. Maybe this is my chance, he thought. To just be. He picked up his phone and sent a text to Keanu. It had been a few weeks since their time together, but they had stayed in touch occasionally. LeBron was eager to talk to him again, to share where he was mentally, to see if Keanu could offer some insight into what it meant to truly find peace in a world that constantly demanded more. The text was simple. "Hey Keanu, I've been thinking about what you said. I need your advice again. Can we talk soon?" Keanu's response came almost immediately. "Of course. I'll be in town next week. Let's meet up." LeBron felt a sense of calm wash over him at the thought of seeing Keanu again. He wasn't sure exactly what he was looking for, but he knew Keanu had a way of making him think about things from a different angle. Maybe, just maybe, he could help him find the balance he needed to get through this injury. When Keanu and LeBron met up a week later, it was like nothing had changed. They sat at a small cafe in the city, the noise of the world around them distant. Keanu sipped his coffee, looking as calm as ever, while LeBron spoke, his words coming slower than usual. He wasn't used to feeling vulnerable, but he knew this was a conversation he needed to have. "I'm struggling, man," LeBron admitted, rubbing his neck as he sat back in his chair. "This injury is messing with me. I don't know what to do with myself when I'm not on the court. I'm used to pushing through everything. But now, I can't. And it's hard." Keanu nodded, his expression empathetic but measured. "It's hard because you're used to being in control. It's not easy to stop and just be. But sometimes, the body tells you things that your mind ignores. You can't keep pushing against it forever." LeBron sighed, his frustration clear. "I feel like I'm losing time. Losing my edge. I don't know how to step back. I'm afraid I'll fall behind." "You're not losing time," Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. "You're gaining perspective. You're learning how to listen to your body, your mind. You're learning that rest isn't weakness. It's part of the process. The strongest athletes know when to take a break. They know when to step back so they can come back stronger." LeBron looked at him, his mind processing the words. He had spent his entire life building up his physical and mental strength, but now he was being forced to accept that sometimes strength meant stepping away, letting himself heal, not just physically, but mentally. "I get it. But it's still hard." Keanu smiled gently. "Of course it's hard. Growth always is. But it's worth it. You'll come back stronger, LeBron. Not just in your body, but in your mind. You'll have a new understanding of what it means to be fully present in every moment, on and off the court." LeBron nodded slowly, the weight of Keanu's words sinking in. He wasn't alone in this. He didn't have to go through it by himself. And just like that, he realized that the answer wasn't in the next game or the next title. It was in taking the time to heal, to embrace the stillness, and to come back stronger not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. The recovery process wasn't easy, but over time, LeBron found his rhythm again. He spent his days in physical therapy, focusing on strengthening his body, but also on strengthening his mind. He meditated more. He spent time with family. He focused on being present in the small moments, the ones that mattered most. His return to the court was slower than he'd hoped, but when he finally stepped back into the game, he did so with a new sense of purpose. It wasn't just about winning, it was about being present in every moment. It was about understanding that sometimes it was okay to step back and trust the process, trust the journey, and know that the true strength was in the balance. Keanu watched from afar, his quiet presence a reminder that the lessons they had shared were not just for the moment. They were for life. And LeBron, in his own way, had learned that lesson. He had found peace, and with it, a new strength that would carry him through whatever came next.